So welcome everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Michael Kitces. This week I want to talk about age bias and the challenges that we have, particularly as younger advisors coming into the industry. So this week's question comes from Ashley. Ashley says, I'm 27 years old, work in an RA that serves mostly retirees. And when I talk to our clients, sometimes it feels like they view me more like one of their grandkids than a financial advisor. Meeting with prospects is even worse. So Ashley's question, how do I overcome age bias that older clients have against younger advisors like me? So Ashley, I feel your pain here. I lived this as well. I was a life insurance agent coming straight out of college. Like literally, I graduated Memorial Day weekend, so I graduated Saturday. I packed everything I owned on Sunday. I drove home on Monday, and Labor Day Monday, and first thing Tuesday morning, I reported for work as a financial advisor in an insurance agency. I was 22, and I sucked at it. I was a bad salesperson. I was a mediocre salesperson, and I was a horrible prospector. Prospecting was the worst part for me by far. And basically the only alternative was, well, if you don't want to go out there to prospect, here's a cubicle and a phone. Right, so you could do cold calling and use the cold calling scripts because this was still early enough that the do not call list was not fully implemented yet. And frankly, I think the only thing I hated more than prospecting was cold calling, which was even more horrific. So, it was a huge challenge, and it took me a while to realize that essentially my problem in trying to prospect was I was embarrassed to meet with prospects and people who had money. I was young. I didn't know very much. I knew that I was young and didn't know very much. I knew they knew I was young and didn't know very much. So basically I had zero self-confidence, communicated no confidence. I probably didn't help that I was an introvert as well. So just meeting strangers in general, a little scary for me. So I decided to solve the problem, or at least the self-confidence part. I can't solve the introvert part. And that was with education. So to me, the first step to overcoming age bias, there's a lot of age bias that really isn't age bias per se. It's how people react when you don't have any confidence in yourself, which is often the case when we're young and new as professionals and we're not quite confident in our own knowledge and abilities yet. So I did this by going to get my CFP marks. Ultimately, for me, finding a CFP program was not enough. I went even further with that. So I did my CFP program with the American College, and then I went on for more post-CFP designations after that. So I got my CLU, I got my CHFC, I did my Master's in Financial Services, working at the time, just doing it part-time, evenings, weekends, couple hours a week, enrolled for a long period of time. Eventually, you pop out some designations. And I have to admit, for me, at least as I got the education, it was truly transformative. Now, part of that is just because my sheer competency got better. I knew my stuff. I could talk intelligently about the issues that clients were facing. And as I realized I knew my shit, pardon my French, it built my self-confidence. And once I could talk confidently for clients because I knew my stuff, I knew I was an expert, and I had, a bunch of degrees and designations to substantiate that. That's what I think really started changing the conversations with prospects and clients. When you are confident, people are confident in you when you're confident in yourself. So when I wasn't confident myself, prospects and clients weren't confident in me either, and it showed in the crappy results. When I knew my stuff, when I really knew I knew it, and I communicated more confidently, that showed in the results as well, and the results got better. So, this is sort of the infamous fake it if you make it kind of thing. Now, some of you out there may be awesome at the whole fake it until you make it thing. I suck at it. I don't have the confidence to fake it until I make it. I only know how to actually do it right the first time. So I had to find a path to get the confidence in myself to be able to speak confidently for clients. And for me, that was education. Now, there are some additional issues you get into with age bias that I think are worth recognizing as well. The next is about first impressions. So we have lots of research out there. First impressions are crucial. They have a really big impact on people. They're really hard to overcome anyways, overcome later. And, simply put, if you don't do anything to control the first impressions that are formed of you, you may struggle a bit with how the first impressions impact you. Because if you're not controlling the perception at all, if you're not doing anything to try to control the perception, frankly, you're going to get most likely stuck in the bucket of young financial advisor. If that's the first impression you give off, that's going to be hard to overcome later. So, for me, I had a couple of deliberate steps I followed in trying to overcome this. One, frankly, was how I dressed. How you dress has a big impact on first impressions. It's a very kind of unpopular thing out there. We all like to say, like, we're our own special human beings. Everyone should value me because of my own special snowflake self. I'm sorry, but accept reality. No one's going to care enough to learn more about you and why you're special if their first impression of you is so negative. They don't care to invest the time and energy and effort to learn more about you and understand you. So if you don't control the first impression that occurs, you don't get to the second part where you get to show why you're special and valuable and meaningful and all that. So I hate to say it. I know it's unpopular. The clothes matter. The looks matter. So, in our firm, people in our office don't always wear a tie, so I always wore a tie. If everyone else was wearing a tie, I wore my jacket. I wore my suit coat. I wanted people to have the impression of me, at least if it was going to be, wow, this is a young guy sitting across from me, if that was the impression from the client, at least I want to be, well, this is a really well-dressed and well-put-together young man. Now, I'll note, I'm still a frugal guy, so there was a recent controversial post in Advisors Perspectives talking about particularly how female advisors should dress, and not only talking about female advisors need to dress nicely, but suggesting nice shoes, which meant buy $600 Manolo Blahniks. I was not buying $2,000 suits, which I guess is our male equivalent of buying $600 pumps. I was buying, $3 for $500 suits off the rack from Joseph Banks. So, this isn't about can you be like the most tip-top fancy dressed person, because frankly, when we're getting started as younger advisors, we probably can't afford it. But you can still be appropriately well-dressed and put together. Tasteful and respectful and in recognized professional dress, because that's the impression you're trying to set that you're a professional. The second important part of first impressions around communication, the second part about first impressions is communication. I figured out pretty quickly that some of my best prospect and new client meetings were the ones where we communicated by email first. And it's a little counterintuitive, but I realize the reason why it worked, at least for me, and I think it's something that many of you can translate as well, I write well. Not just, I write long, massive blog posts, which many of you know about, but I write clean emails. Proper punctuation, proper spelling, clean grammar, well-written sentences, paragraphs where paragraph breaks should occur. My signature block had that growing list of the alphabet soup of designations, and I'll admit it looked a little bit ridiculous sometimes, but it left an impression. So now when I met people, the first comments that I heard was something like, wow, I was expecting someone older, or wow, you've accomplished a lot for being such a young advisor. So I couldn't escape the fact that I was young, but now my age was an asset. People have confidence in someone who's young, who's clearly an up-and-comer and successful. So my age was now a plus. It was, wow, not only do you communicate well and interact well and you've done all this education and designations, but you've done so much at a young age, that actually increased the confidence level because of my age. My age was now an asset instead of a liability. Now, the other thing that is worth noting, the other skill that you have to think about in working on connecting to older clients and overcoming some of the age bias is this thing called empathy. So empathy, technical definition, the ability to understand issues from someone else's perspective and then respond accordingly. So it's kind of the technical label for that skill set that frankly some advisors just have naturally, to be able to listen and build rapport with other people. But what it means is you have to learn to be an effective listener. I've written this in the past in the blog, frankly, notwithstanding how much I pound the table about the importance of technical competency. It's your listening skills and your ability to connect and hear clients and make clients feel heard that ultimately is the biggest driver of success. And frankly, just in the way most firms are evolving now, it's the key skill that lets you move up from just being a paraplanner where you do technically competent planning analysis into a full advisor where you actually manage client relationships because you have empathy abilities and you can build rapport. Now, sadly, there's not much training on this in the industry. I think it's going to be a growth area going forward. But right now, I think you can look at some structured programs, particularly around life planning, things like Money Quotient has some good tools around helping to better understand clients and their perspective. It's not billed as empathy training, but effectively you'll get a bunch from in the program. You can search locally, just classes on active listening and empathy. It really matters. If your blocking point, I know for some people, when they're getting started, the truth is it's really hard to pay attention and listen to the client because we're still so self-conscious about whether we're giving off the right impression and doing all the rest of the stuff that we need to do as advisors. Frankly, if you struggle with that, the first thing I recommend is don't go to class about empathy. Go to Toastmasters and learn to stand up in front of an audience and speak some words and not freak out about it. Because once you get through that, then it's easier to start focusing on the client. Hannah, thanks for the suggestion. So Sudden Money also has recommended classes on empathy and listening. Now, the last piece I'll touch on before we wrap up, say there is one other alternative about how you avoid the issue of age bias with clients. And the answer is you work with clients your own age where you don't have an age bias problem. So I recognize that so many firms in the industry are focused on baby boomers and retirees because that's where the money is, that's where the pools of assets are. But more and more firms are recognizing that it's important to build relationships with the next generation of clients, with younger professionals. So if you're in a larger firm, maybe you can be that person in your firm. You can be an entrepreneur and build a young client initiative in your firm. Some people ultimately decide to leave and go out on their own. So, we see this all the time from XY Planning Network, nearly 300 advisors in 2.5 years, all coming out because they're tired of serving older clients and they want to serve their peers. Now, I don't know how many of them are doing it because they're tired of age bias versus they just proactively, affirmatively want to serve their peers. But recognize that older clients, sort of generically construed, are not the only people on the planet that you can work with in doing financial planning. You can work with people your own age. The business model is a little different. The income dynamics are a little bit different, but it's certainly not impossible. Frankly, working with retirees is where a lot of the jobs are right now if you want to be an employee. But if you're ready to launch a firm, you do have other options. That's not the only client base that you have to serve. But the bottom line, kind of wrapping up and getting back to Ashley's original question. So the challenge of perceived age bias against younger advisors from older clients, it's real. I've lived it too. It's not insurmountable though. In the past, ironically, we dealt with this less in the past because when we were all cold calling using cold calling scripts, no one knew how old the person on the other end of the line was. The irony is, as we go more financial advising and the rise of the do not call lists and the more that we see clients face to face, I think the more this has actually become at least a recognized challenge. But the path to overcoming it is first and foremost your confidence. If you are not confident in being an expert, your clients will not be confident in you. So find what it takes to get your confidence. Maybe it's technical competency and education. That was my path. Maybe it's post-CFP education because the CFP course isn't enough for you. Maybe it's Toastmasters so you can just get more comfortable in front of strangers. Second, recognize the importance of first impressions. I know it sucks. It's one of those life is unfair things, but it's reality. So you can control it and you need to control it. How you're dressed, how you're groomed, how you look, how you communicate with clients, both verbally and written, matters. And you can control that in positive ways. And then the third piece is recognize that eventually get confident by learning to listen better. Ultimately, clients will have the confidence in you when they feel heard and understood. That ultimately is a skill you can train and practice. It takes time. The faster you're confident in yourself, the faster you can get to learning to listen to your clients as well, really listening to them. And frankly, that's also an area where mentors can help, right? So I know there was a mention here of the value of mentors. I know a lot of advisors that have had success by sitting in on client meetings with senior advisors to just learn some of these skills, see them modeled. Now, sadly, I know with working with some senior advisors, this actually gets harder because sometimes experienced advisors undermine our young advisor authority without realizing it, right? Calling us young, making jokes about movie references. Ha ha, Michael won't get it because he's too young. I'm seeing a lot of hearts that many of you have experienced that one as well. So one of the senior advisors that I know used to have this, frankly, terrible habit of calling the paraplanners in his firm the kids in the firm. Like literally he would call them the kids. He'd call them the kids to his clients. He'd call them the kids internally to other staff members. And so, those funny, subtle shifts in language, the calling them kids feels very belittling and demeaning. So he started calling them the Wonder Kids instead, the German Wunderkid. And once he started calling them the Wonder Kids, now the perception changes. Now this isn't a denigration about their age. It's an uplifting statement about how much they've accomplished while being so young. So recognize you can even talk to advisors in your firm. If you're a younger advisor that's struggling with this, say something to the senior advisor if you feel like they're undermining you. You have to say it nicely and respectfully, but it's an okay thing to point out to them and say, hey, maybe you could try calling me something different. Wonder Kid instead of kid, haha. Might feel a little self-aggrandizing, but try to make the point to them that sometimes you will need their help to establish your authority, because certainly if they're going to say things like kids, they will undermine your authority. So I hope that helps a little as food for thought around overcoming age bias as a financial advisor in a world where we don't just do it virtually with cold calling scripts anymore. This is Office Hours with Michael Kitces, 1 p.m. East Coast times. Thanks for hanging out, everyone, and have a great day.